What is the name of your topic again? I'm going to let you go after that.
For the most part, you know, I usually refer to it as the Moorish legacy and the Masonic agenda. And those are the two things that I focus on there. I've also referred to it as history, health, and wealth because those are the three main categories that I break the lectures down into in the presentations. For those of you that haven't met me, my name is Rick Smith. I'm also known as UFO teacher in paranormal circles. And at this point in time, I am actually the only one out there who has gone as far as I have, talking about this information, which for some is truly emancipating and enlightening, and for others represents the end of an empire. So there's really no beginning to any of this. So the way I usually start off is I find a good departure. For me, ultimately it begins at the age of 21 for me, and I'm 42 now. And at the age of 21, I had my first awakening. And in that first awakening, everything that happened to me from childhood on, earliest memories being about 4 years old to then, came back to me in a flood of memories that, as a kid, you think are just dreams. But you can't remember dreams, you can only remember memories. And all these things came back. And they came back with that initial awakening at the age of 21 with the visitation of a supreme extraterrestrial being that I refer to as the crone, which is a Native American reference that I use on purpose because of what she represents. And the crone is part of what I refer to as the sisterhood in the galactic community. All right. Now, that sisterhood has served as a midwife on many different ways throughout Earth's history between Earth and the rest of the galactic community. And in that awakening at the age of 21, she reminded me when she first appeared to me at 4 years old, at the age of 4, when she actually opened up a portal in the middle of the living room, reached through, grabbed me, pulled me through, and took me on a visual journey as a kid, showing me things that I didn't understand, that only when I reached the age of 21 could I understand. And what she was showing me was a lot of strife between the races and the sexes, issues between men and women, issues between black and white, issues between white and everybody. So, and that's a hard thing to swallow as a kid, 4 or 5 years old, you don't understand what you're looking at. But she says, I will come back to you again, and of course that was the age of 21 when she came back again. And she says, you will understand all of this. She says, you need to see this now, even though I'm showing you all these harsh images of humanity. So, from the age of 21 on, I was asked if I would use my talents and skills as an artist to take downloaded information, put it into the artwork, and that's how it started, as an artist. And my artwork can be seen online on my website at ufoteacher.com in the gallery area. I wrote the website up there so you guys. From the artwork came the first book that I wrote some years back. Officially published it through Author House in 2005, called Legions of Light, Armies of Darkness. And then from there, the lectures took off. Because I was told in no uncertain terms, I've given you a big mouth for a reason, and I want you to use it. So I was also told that as time went on, I would come across other mentors and teachers here on Earth that would help to fill in the gaps for me in many different ways. Well, this lecture represents two things being merged together seamlessly. One is the what I refer to as the Robert Morning Sky Hopi cosmology, okay, and the other half is the Exhumation of a Nation with Noble Drew Ali and the Moorish Legacy.
Exhuming of a Nation?
Yes. Well, that's what I'm referring to, the name of the book by
Yes.
Catlett Bay.
Yeah, about
Okay.
that thick
Yeah.
chariot.
And so I got a copy of that book. One of my mentors had seen the point that I had reached in the year 2005, and yeah, that's the one. I have the original
Yeah, I
yellow
like
one.
to plug it.
Yeah. So this is a copy of the book right here. All right, and I actually have the one that came out before this with the yellow cover, but this one's much nicer to read. You definitely don't want to deal with the copy I got. It'll make you go blind. But this is the good one to get. And with that, in 2005, someone you guys probably already know by the name of Peter Moon from Skybooks, who deals with the Montauk Project and also now, more recently in Romania, issues with the Moorish Legacy, issues with time travel, issues with Noble Drew Ali and the Montauk Nation and the Hopi Nation. He saw me talking one day and he realized that there was something I was trying to break through to and trying to present to people. And so all of a sudden he pulls me aside in a group meeting and says, look, he says, guess who I met? He says, I've met someone by the name of Elihu Pleasant Bay, okay, which is this book right here. And he says, I have a copy of this book. And he says, I haven't had a chance to read it all the way through. He says, because I'm in dialogue with Pleasant Bay instead. But he says, here, and he gives me the book. He says, I know this is meant for you. It's not meant for me. So I took it and started reading through it, and all of a sudden, all the gaps were being filled in from the information I was getting from the sisterhood there in terms of what was going on. And that coincided with the lecture I gave in 2005 in New Jersey. Of all places, it's called New Egypt, New Jersey, okay? And that is what blew everybody right out of the water, because they had never heard anything. I mean, I think the only person out there who comes remotely close to what I'm talking about would be David Icke, and that's about it, okay? I took it one step further in an area that most people in the field of ufology or even metaphysics will not touch because they're too afraid to go that far. With that being said, what I did was I usually structure my lectures in 3 parts: history, health, and wealth. But they can go back and forth, they can be blended back and forth. The reason I break it down that way is because it represents the 3 main volumes of humanity. With the bookends being linguistics and etymology on one side and economics and real estate on the other, holding them up: history, health, and wealth. Because once you understand those things, then you know how to bring down Goliath, so to speak. And with that, I'll get into the information that I wanted to share with you guys. So, I suppose the best way to explain it is this. A very long time ago, so far at a point where no human being could even comprehend it as far as history goes, there was a civilization, and that civilization decided to start expanding itself quite a bit. That civilization we are going to know as the Aryan Empire. Now, as I go along talking about this with you all, there'll be side notes in terms of linguistics and etymology so that you understand where words come from that we take for granted every day. And what's amazing is that a good portion of our so-called modern day vocabulary actually comes from extraterrestrial origins. So I'm referring to this empire, as we all know it, as the Aryan Empire. Now, Aryan, spelled A-R-I-A-N, is where you get two other words from in our history. One is Orion, as the scientists refer to it, the Orion constellation. And the other one is what it was bastardized into in terms of Aryan super race. Henceforth the Third Reich and the Nazis. All right, because it is that same civilization that gives birth to what's later known as the Anunnaki, and the Nordics, or the Nazis, were very much into the Anunnaki mythology. So they take the term Aryan and mispronounce it as Aryan. And of course, this race of beings, okay, so who were they? They were a race of bipedal reptiles, okay, pale-skinned reptilians, emphasis on pale skin. And they were the kings and queens of that empire. Thank you. And now the kings were the ones who started the expansion, okay? And they got to a certain point where they were happy with what they had. They had pushed the empire far enough, taken over other civilizations, and then of course, at a certain point, they started teaching the queens how to do it, the reptilian queens. Now, the queens, throughout history, what you see is that the queens always have a taste for blood, okay? Dominance, expansion, they are much more aggressive. The kings were happy with what they had. The queens were taught how to do it, and the queens were like, well, we can do better than this. We want to push it even further. Okay, fine. Then the kings were like, well, fine, you take over the whole operation, so the queens took it over. And they began expanding the empire even further, the Aryan Empire, out further. Well, two things happened. One, and both of them being extremely significant. Because of the female queens, because they were the ones more aggressive and more ambitious, they had pushed the empire so far in terms of extracting resources from each and every solar system that they eventually pushed it far enough to find us, planet Earth, in a very fertile and uncorrupt state, with rich and valuable resources that no one could really find anywhere else, not to mention the whole solar system and the tertiary gases that we have with the outer planets, and the way you can mix things together to make certain products that are tradable and valuable. Aside from that, also the lust for the tradability of gold as well as a valuable resource. That was the first thing that happened. The second thing, just before that, was that they expanded so far that they started running into conflict with another younger but equally powerful empire out there known as the Canis Empire. Okay, so now, as a side note, some linguistics here. The Aryan Empire, the queens, the elite of the upper echelon, were known as the Siakar, and the queens themselves were known as the Sata queens. Okay, as far as running into the other younger and equally powerful empire, the Canis feudal lords is what they were referred to, the Canis Empire. Now, who were they? The Canis feudal lords were what you refer to as bipedal canines, okay? Dogs. And it's from the word canis that you get the word canine and cannibal because of who they were. These were the kind of warriors, okay, that when they fought on the battlefield, they didn't take prisoners, they just ate you right there and cannibalized you right on the battlefield. That was their policy, and that's where we get that concept from. Their elite warriors were referred to as the Dukes, DK, and as such, the Shakespearean phrase, the Dukes of War. This is how we get the phrase dogs of war. The word dog is an extraterrestrial term coming from the word duk. And this is how you find words: canis, cannibal, canine, dog, Aryan, Orion, and Aryan super race. This is where all that's coming from. As you can see, also what was happening here was the Aryans, the elite, upper echelon, pale-skinned reptilians. These Canis feudal lords, this dog race, they were also pale-skinned. All right. Now they went to war with each other over dominion over expansion of each of their empires. Okay? Now, eventually they realized, after slaughtering each other, that it was not cost effective to engage in such warfare. It was much more cost effective, as per the mentality of a corporation, to actually work together under a tentative peace, even though they hated each other, and together expand their empires to make a greater profit. By doing this, this is where you get the fundamental beginning of what we now know today as the two-party system. Okay, the reptilians and the canines, all right, and there are linguistics involved with that down the line that we'll get into in a little bit here. But just keep that in mind. This is where your two-party system comes from, that cooperation there. Now, they divided up the duties in such a way where the reptilian queens, once again, were in charge of making the decisions as in the lead, and the Canis feudal lords were in charge of doing the dirty work and going out there and actually doing what needed to be done. I'm pointing that out as well because, once again, down through our own history, you'll see how that manifests itself in our everyday lives with our political parties and our corporations on this planet. So with that expansion comes the discovery of this solar system, as I mentioned before. In that discovery, what had happened was that, I've had people ask me, how would you describe the whole extraterrestrial issue? And I sum it up under one term that they've never comprehended before: real estate, and more specifically, real estate investing. And they usually get that shocked look on their face, like, what are you talking about? Because the average ufologist who talks about this stuff talks about it from the perspective of, being kidnapped, being abducted, etc., and so forth, and the usual run-of-the-mill stuff, which, in my observation, doesn't really happen to people of color and hue, but it seems to happen all the time to white people. And we'll get into why that is as well, as to where that negative relationship comes from with the pale skin, and how the benevolent factions of the galactic community are more in favor of the people of color and hue, and therefore the family of man. So that's another thing that people don't want to touch upon and don't want to talk about because they feel it's too controversial, especially when you have these idiots in the New Age arena who are busy spewing this garbage about how we're all equal, and yet those people in the New Age industry are usually these rich, spoiled housewives from the North Shore of Long Island whose husbands come home with a huge bankroll from the stock market. If I had that much money, I'd be glad to, blow sunshine up everyone's yin-yang as well. So the reality of it is something much, much different. And so with that discovery of our solar system, there is the idea of who's going to be favored in terms of controlling the solar system. The reason I brought up the term real estate is this: every solar system that's out there, including ours, is seen as one kingdom. So in esoteric literature, whenever you see the word kingdom, they're referring to an entire solar system. And in every kingdom, there is a throne of power. In other words, one planet that's considered the center controlling factor of the whole domain. In our solar system, that center of power is planet Earth, which explains a lot. And of course, being the throne of power, it has the right and dominion by feudal law over all the other planets in the solar system. It's all seen as one huge chunk of real estate broken down into small planets. Okay, not a whole lot different than what we see on here with plats and avenues and streets and so forth. Now, keep in mind with that, knowing that real estate is the backbone of this whole thing here, there's another concept I want you guys to keep in mind as well. There's two things at play here. There is the benevolent factions who have an investment in flesh and bone, okay? In other words, you, me, and the next door neighbor, okay? Family of man, and the development of the human condition so as to have the ability to, as a society, join the galactic community. of which we're no ways near getting to. Flesh and bone. The other side of the equation is those in the malevolent factions who have an investment in wood and stone. In other words, the real estate that you live on. So flesh and bone versus wood and stone. During the course of everything I talk about, just keep those two concepts in mind there, because that serves as a good foundation for understanding this. In fact, as we get into it deeper here, you'll see that the Moorish legacy represents flesh and bone, whereas what I refer to as the Masonic agenda represents wood and stone. Okay? So here we have a bit of a conundrum here in our own solar system. The planet was found, and the Canis feudal lords, basically they had, you know, their own little cliques and whatnot, and each one of them was favored to a certain degree by the reptilian queens. Okay, there is one that comes to the forefront of all of this, and that one killed off all the other competition, all the other feudal lords who were vying for power in this solar system. That one Canis feudal lord is known as Anu. Okay, now Anu became the favored one of the reptilian queens, and they gave him their blessing to come down here and control the operation, King Anu. Now, to get the job done, what he does is he sends his 3 children down, 1 princess and 2 princes. The 2 main characters being Prince Enlil and Prince Ea, and the sister, Princess Ninhursag. Okay, now Enlil, by feudal law, being the older of the siblings, the 2 brothers, he's the one who's put in charge of the whole operation. That's a problem. Problem is this: he's a sadistic pig who hates the primates on this planet. Okay, and despises all life on this planet. Doesn't want to be here. Doesn't want to be in the solar system, and you know, wants to get out of this in the worst way. He is told in no uncertain terms by his father Anu that you are staying here, otherwise the reptilian queens are going to come down on my head, and this is going to be a big problem. You'll notice that the theme running through this all the time is to have a smooth operation and keep the paycheck going to the queens. As long as you keep the reptilian queens happy, the whole house of cards doesn't cave in. Anu realized he had to fight his way to the top to be the favored one, so he wasn't about to let his son screw it up, regardless of how miserable he was or sadistic he was towards the life forms on this planet. So what Anu does is he tries to smooth it over with his son Enlil by saying, look, I will give you what you need, and here I'm going to send down your brother, Prince Ea, okay, and your sister, Princess Ninhursag. Now, the 2 of them, Ea and Ninhursag, were master geneticists. Okay, they were in charge of going down there to Earth, taking the raw genetic material that was available and turning it into something that could walk upright and be obedient enough to take orders, learn how to flick levers, push buttons, and you know, mine and ore the coal fields and gold and silver and whatever else was tradable on the market at the time, and basically go after that investment in wood and stone, obey orders, but not be self-aware. Okay, just smart enough to obey orders, and also strong enough. This, of course, leads to the beginning of the problem here. Creating the perfect beast that could walk upright. And they were having one failure after another. And Enlil is getting impatient because he's in charge. In the background of all this, Ea, who is the master geneticist, is bent out of shape because he feels that since he's the master geneticist and he's the one creating these slaves, that he should be the one in charge because he's the smart one. He does not like the position that his father has put him in by being subordinate to his sadistic brother. Okay, and the reason is this. he and his sister keep working at it. And one day, he's about to give up. And all of a sudden, his sister, Ninhursag, says, "Come here. I want to show you something." And sure enough, there was this creation that was able to stand upright and obey orders, and they called it the Adapa. Linguistically, Ad, Appa. Appa is where we get the word ape from. Ad means mud, clay of the earth. So you're talking about a creature here that was electrified to stand upright and given a frequency to come to life and be only aware enough to once again obey those orders and be productive, and therefore be a successful test tube baby, so to speak. So Ninhursag, a female, in conjunction with her brother Ea, is the one who creates the beginning of the human race. This goes a long way to ending discussions, bringing the whole discussion to a complete and abrupt end on whether God is male or female. The bottom line is, it's both, male and female, brother and sister, working together as master geneticists. Ninhursag actually created it. Ea is the one who gave it his seal of approval. And that's how that goes. Now, problem was this. They start now producing generation after generation, okay, of these slaves. Well, Enlil, who hates them in the first place, he works them to death under conditions that were so ugly that you couldn't even imagine. And intentionally does it to kill them off, forcing his brother Ea to have to produce more. This, of course, is building up the tension between Enlil, who doesn't want to be there and is forced to be there as the older sibling, and Ea, who hates his brother for being in charge and feels that he's the smarter one who should be in charge, and isn't because he's the younger one. This, of course, is this kind of friction between the two brothers is what gives birth to all manner of other mythology, whether it be Cain and Abel, or actually Horus and Seth, okay, and the feud between them, Remus and Romulus. This is where any kind of that mythology between good brother, so-called good brother and bad brother, this is where it's stemming from right here. Now, it was forbidden by Anu and Enlil to be teaching the beast anything beyond obeying orders for slavery, okay? Forbidden. They were not allowed to know where they came from. They were not allowed to know anything. They were not allowed to be genetically advanced any further beyond being a good, obedient slave. And that was the law, punishable by death, execution. Prince Ea decides to buck the whole system and say, you know what? I am sick and tired of my brother slaughtering these creations, okay? For better or for worse, I am going to take a secret group of quote-unquote anointed ones, and I am going to start elevating them and teaching them all that forbidden knowledge. So herein lies the rudimentary beginning of where secret societies came from. Enlil, I mean not Enlil, but Ea, as master geneticist, as God, takes a group of them, a select group out of the Adapas, brings them into a cave, and he proceeds to utilize what's referred to as reptilian technology, which was initially meant for brainwashing purposes. Whereas you march a whole bunch of slaves into the cave, flick the switch, the light comes on, and bam, everybody's brain is erased like a tape recorder and reprogrammed in 3 seconds flat to be obedient. That's how they were initially doing it with the Adapas as well, to program them to know how to take orders right away and what slave labor they were supposed to do. Ea decides to use it in reverse, to deprogram them and then re-educate them with their whole history in a flash as to who they are and the place they are within the solar system and why they were created. Now, he was running into a bit of a problem there, though, because genetics-wise, they were not ingesting the information fast enough. Ninhursag and Ea had a relationship with a group of extraterrestrial beings called the Ankyls. Okay. Now that name, the Ankyls, linguistics. Ankyls is Ankhels, Ankyls. Eventually the name Ankyl down through history becomes mispronounced as Angels, as in Los Angeles. Alright? And it's from Angels you get the word angel. So any reference you have to angel is an extraterrestrial reference to these race of beings called Ankyls. Now what were the Ankyls? Well, the Ankyls fit right in with the mythological perception of an angel in that they are an highly evolved, avionic, bird-like race of beings. The best description that has ever been visualized on screen is in the movie The Abyss by James Cameron. The transparent beings on there, which was a perfect rendition too, because the Ankyls were half in and half out of the third dimension. They were so evolved, they were more non-physical, to the point, like they depicted in The Abyss, you could see right through them, but they were also physical at the same time. Okay? Their name, Ankyls, becomes the word angel, and the abbreviation of the word Ankyl is Ankh, A-N-K-H, which is where you get the other spelling, O-N-K. And if you look at an Ankh, what is it? It's not an angel, as everybody wants you to believe. It is actually the head of a bird, the wings of a bird, and the tail of a bird. That's what an Ankyl is. An extraterrestrial race of beings, bird-like race. They had the secret ingredient that Ninhursag and Ea needed. They had what's called the gene for passion, the ability to get over that hump and stop thinking like a slave and start thinking like a master. So Ea and Ninhursag, they take the genetic code for passion from the Ankyls and inject it into the beast, the secret group, the anointed ones. At that point, then they start evolving that much faster and start ingesting the information that much further and getting into esoteric knowledge. Okay. Now these anointed ones become known as the Iesu. Okay. Now that word is very important in Arabia and the Middle East and China and as well as North Africa. It's known all over the world. Iesu comes in variations. You'll see it as Isa, you'll see it as Asa, okay? It's spelled I-E-S-U, okay? Now, it is from Iesu that you get the mispronunciation Jesus, and then the bastardized pronunciation Jesus, okay? Now, if you were to go back in time to Mary and Joseph and ask them, where's Jesus, they'd look at you like you have four heads because that name never existed. His proper name was Isa, and Isa is a variation of Iesu, and it was a reference, possibly not even his actual name, okay? But, and we'll get into that in just a short time here. The whole point I'm making is that gene for passion was infused into the anointed ones, the Iesu, the Adapa, okay? Keep this in mind as we go along. The gene for passion ends up getting funneled through the Temple of Solomon. And when it comes out the other side, it's known as the Passion of the Christ. And that is where the Passion of the Christ comes from. It comes from extraterrestrial origin, the gene for passion from the Ankyls, who we mistakenly refer to as angels. Okay? So all this starts making sense and starts fitting together now. Now, the other side of it was this. Now, Prince Ea is just breaking the rules left and right, taking them into secret meetings, teaching them all this stuff, one group after another. Since he was associated with the Ankyls, and the root word is Ankh, okay, he eventually became known by the anointed ones in a variation of that word Ankh. They refer to him as Enki. So this is how Prince Ea becomes known as Prince Enki. Now, in keeping with that idea, Each and every one of the Adapas had to breed and mate with certain male to certain female. They were all marked in a certain way. Okay, this of course is the beginning of now what eventually became known in Auschwitz as the barcode, or what's known today as the Verichip, what they want to stick in all the babies as they're born. But this originally comes from the whole concept of marking the beast so that this male can only mate with this female. And as such, when they mate, they produce the perfect obedient offspring. And this guaranteed the perfect obedient slave generation after generation. Okay? Well, aside from Prince Ea breaking the law and teaching a select group forbidden knowledge, all right, he saw how miserable the rest of the Adapas were, being killed off, worked to the bone, and dropping dead left and right. So he goes in to where they were sleeping, and of course this is where you get the concept of a so-called Garden of Eden from. And he tells them, he says, "Look, how happy are you guys?" And they're like, "We're miserable, and we're dropping dead left and right." So at that point he tells them, "You know that one thing that you're allowed to do once every so often to produce the perfect obedient slave, in other words, sex, the one and only time they actually felt any sense of happiness," he says, "you can do that whenever you want, even though you're programmed to only do it at the ring of a bell, and that you're only programmed to mate with one particular other female. The point is, you can do it whenever you want." And of course they had that look on their face like, okay, so we can do this. And he says, "You don't have to mate with someone with the same mark." He says, "You can mate with whoever you want. Have at it." So that's what happens, and so they start mating with each other left and right there, henceforth screwing up the genetic breeding program. One day, Enlil's walking through the so-called Garden of Eden and wondering why no work is getting done. Everything is dead quiet. Happens to start looking for the Adapas. Okay, and as such, he hears a noise behind the bush, pulls the bush away, realizes there's a male and female mating with each other off schedule. Not only are they mating with each other off schedule, but they have two completely different marks on their arms, and they're not even supposed to be mating with each other in the first place. Okay, so now the gig is up. And as such, now the hunt is on for Prince Ea, because he knows it was his brother. He knows it was his brother getting back at him, breaking the law. Okay? And see, due to the whole system, the way it was worked, the whole reason for creating the Adapa is so that middle management, known as the Anunnaki, didn't have to do the slave labor. The first rebellion came from the Anunnaki, and you will see the mythologies coinciding with this, that first rebellion, because they were the ones sent down by the Canis feudal lords to do the slave labor, dig out the mines, and they were like, "We're warriors, we're not supposed to be doing this slave labor." So this was, of course, the whole foundation for having the Adapas do the slave labor, because Prince Enlil was too afraid that the Anunnaki would rebel against him again. So this also adds the friction, the frustration, and the stress there, with Prince Ea breaking the law, and not only teaching a group forbidden knowledge, but then teaching the rest of them that they can mate with each other anytime that they want. Now Enlil put out the word and was on the hunt for his brother, Prince Ea, also known as Enki. As such, the word came down that Ea had broken the law. So Ea knew at this point his time was up and he had to get out of town. He ends up taking a select group of the Iesu, the anointed ones, with him. Not all of them could come. Some of them actually intentionally stayed behind because they knew they represented the living library of the truth, the real history that they couldn't afford to have swept under the rug. Okay, so some of them decided to stay behind. Others went with Ea and escaped the solar system. Those that went with Ea, also known as Enki, actually went to the Pleiades and went on to become the so-called Pleiadians that we hear about all the time in ufology. And so that's what they evolved into. The ones that stayed behind here, okay, they became not only known as the Iesu, but since they were the polar opposites of the Adapa, they weren't stunted anymore, they weren't ignorant, I think therefore I am, they were self-aware, they became known as the Ad-Um, okay, which, when you pull that word apart, Ad-Apa, Ad-Um, meaning the frequency, sound to spirit, that which awakens the beast, and allows it to go from a slave to a master, and therefore still be of the earth, Ad, clay, mud, very similar to what you would see with maybe a Frankenstein story. The monster awakens and then becomes self-aware, okay? And there's an interesting symbolism in that too with regard to the Moorish legacy in terms of how Frankenstein's monster is brought into existence as well. The Adam, the Iesu, they realize now Enlil is on the warpath. He is slaughtering the Adapas left and right, who have crossbreeded the wrong way. He's going after the Iesu, the Adam, hunting them down and killing them off left and right. The only thing that stopped him from this slaughterfest was that the reptilian queens got wind of what was going on with the operation down here, and once again we're back to square one. If you got to keep the queens happy, you got to keep the paycheck going to the queens. They knew something was wrong here and it was about to cave in, so to stop that, they sent down their own envoys, okay, their own emissaries, to work with the Anunnaki and Enlil, and to stop him from slaughtering what was supposed to be good slave labor. Those envoys, okay, those emissaries, they are what you might refer to today as the Greys. The ones with the large head and the large dark eyes, okay? They seem insectoid, but they're more reptilian than you realize, and they serve as little obedient drones to report back to the reptilian queens. The very existence of the Greys represents the foundational beginning of other organizations that we know today as the NSA, the CIA, Black Ops, things like that, okay? The Schutzstaffel, the SS, all right? Nazi Germany, this is where they got the idea from. Why? They were sent down here to make sure the operation kept running smoothly, and then they would report back to the queens, and they went right to Enlil and said, look, we don't care who your father is. He says, you have to stop killing the slaves, otherwise who's going to do the slave labor? And then we're back at square one with the Anunnaki rebelling, because they are middle management, they are not going to denigrate themselves to do the slave labor. You have to stop killing the Adapas. Okay, fine. Enlil calms down and stops killing them off, but is still on the hunt for the anointed ones, the Adam, the Iesu. Okay, the Iesu, the Adam, they know very well they don't have the firepower or the wherewithal to go up against his Sky Armada, which is very similar to what George Lucas depicted in the movie Star Wars with the Star Destroyers. That's what Enlil had, the Sky Armada. He was known as the Master of the Skies. And as such, the Adam decided, or the Iesu, they decided, look, we got to preserve this information for future generations to come. We can't afford to be picked off and slaughtered one by one. So this is when they adopt the policy of, let's run for the hills, let's run for the mountains, okay? And you'll see where this is leading in just a moment. They adopt that policy and they become the masters of stealth. The masters of stealth, the masters of guerrilla warfare, the masters of the underground, okay? As such, if you look at every culture across the board, it doesn't matter whether it's Native American or Scottish or Irish or African, everybody has this kind of creature in their history, in their mythology, and in their legends that taught them how to run for the hills and avoid the overpowering enemy. The atom has survived to this day, but we don't call it the atom anymore. Nowadays we refer to it as the Sasquatch, or the Yowie, or the Yeti, or the Berserker, okay, or the Green Man. Every culture has one, every one. And this is why, to this day, the Sasquatch avoid these imbeciles who call themselves Bigfoot hunters like the plague, because, well, let's put it this way, folks. When's the last time you saw a black Bigfoot hunter? All these Bigfoot hunters are these imbecile white people. Sasquatch does not want anything to do with white society, okay? It sees, and we'll get into why later, it sees white America, the white mainstream, and white Europe as the abomination that never should have existed, and as such, it is the holy atom that cannot be touched. These creatures have these amazing, amazing metaphysical capabilities, and they don't all look like the so-called missing link that some people think, okay? Some of them, they have different gradations in their societies too, all right? There are smaller, more evolved ones that actually might look closer to a Homo sapien man, and there are others that serve as the guardians that are more aggressive, more well-built, 10 feet tall, the kind that actually scares a grizzly bear out of the forest, okay? There's many different kinds of Sasquatch and Yowies and Yetis. In Southeast Asia, they refer to them as the orangutans, the forest people, and it's from the term orangutan that you get the watered-down term orangutan, okay? This, of course, is the beginning of what we refer to as guerrilla warfare, which then, in keeping with the idea, flesh and bone versus wood and stone, later on, it evolves into guerrilla warfare on the side of the Moorish legacy versus psychological warfare on the side of the Masonic agenda. Okay? And these are the two colliding forces. Down through the ages, these beings, these Adam, have taught indigenous people how to use guerrilla warfare to fight back. They taught it to the Scottish, they taught it to the Irish, they taught it to the Native Americans, and then the Native Americans passed it on to George Washington and the Founding Fathers. If it wasn't for those guerrilla warfare tactics coming directly from the Adam, there'd be no Revolutionary War, and we'd still be, annexed to the United Kingdom somehow. So keep that in mind in the long lineage of history. Now, that being said, here comes the Greys in conjunction with Enlil. Now, the Greys put the system back in order again. They round up everybody, shove them back in the caves, flip the switch using the reptilian technology of brainwashing, and reprogram everyone to obey the system again. Now, at that point in time, there's two significant things that happen linguistically, and this becomes the ultimate effect on the psychology of the human race in terms of what we perceive as good, which is wrong, and what we perceive as evil, which is also wrong. Enlil decides at that point, he tells the Greys, I don't want them to just be reprogrammed. I want them to be reprogrammed to the point where they worship me and only me, and they are to be programmed to the point where they are never to speak or utter the term Enlil ever again. From now on, they will worship me under one term and one term only, and this is when he pulls an extraterrestrial term, a Canis feudal lord term, right out of the air, and invents the term Gad, spelled GD. And from that point forward, the Adappas, who were programmed to worship Enlil and call him an extraterrestrial term that had never existed on Earth before. That term, Gad, ends up becoming mispronounced as the word God. And this is where the term God comes from. It was created by a sadistic pig who hates humanity in the first place. Okay? And that is who you're worshiping every time you go to church, temple, or mosque. That is what you're worshiping. You're worshiping a Canis feudal lord who sees you as nothing more than part of a 7-course meal. So of course when someone says, oh, God loves you, well, of course he loves you. He salivates at the jowls. He wants to eat you. Why wouldn't he love you? At the same time, he decides, not only do I want to wipe the memory of my original name, but I also want to wipe all memory of my brother, Ea, Enki. And he says, from this day forward, they will be reprogrammed to never, ever utter the name Ea or Enki ever again. My brother will be stricken from the record. From this day forward, he will be known by the most despicable and heinous term he could possibly think of, Baal, B-O-L. And to emphasize, which you'll see in linguistics as we go along here, to emphasize how good or bad something is, you'll see syllables get doubled or replicated. In this case, he says, not only am I going to call him Baal, and not only are the slaves going to know him as Baal, and not only is it going to be a forbidden term to utter, but we are going to call him Dia Baal from now on. Now, Dia Baal ends up being mispronounced as Diablo, and Diablo becomes mispronounced as devil. So, what are we learning here? What we're learning is that the devil was compassionate towards the human race and created us, and the thug who calls himself God was the degenerate who wanted us dead in the first place. So this completely rips the rug out from each and every religious belief on this planet and forces everyone to reevaluate the stupidity of what they've been worshiping in the first place for the past 5,000 years. All right? The Egyptians were well aware of this, but because they were in competition with medieval Europe and the Christian agenda, known as the Catholics, Emperor Justinian and Theodosius passed the laws decreeing that the Egyptian university would be permanently shut down so that no one could learn this truth. So, and if you think I don't have it out for religion, think again, okay? The human race needs to grow up. There is no room in the 21st century for dim-witted religious beliefs. No room at all, and the galactic community will not tolerate it. If you want to be part of the galactic community, you need to put away childish things. And we're not just talking about your little pop guns in the military. We're talking about your dumbass religious beliefs that gave birth to that Masonic military in the first place. Oh, yeah, I'm just going to take a drink of water here, thanks. Then we enter the next phase of Enlil's reign. After he's wiped out everyone and invented the term God and invented the term devil, okay, and brought it upon this earth where it never belonged in the first place. The point is this, Enlil, the Greys knew at this point, Enlil was unstable. The Greys are a little calculating bastards. They're corporate thugs. They think like a corporation. They think like a master calculator, okay? For them, everything is by the book, by the numbers. If the ledger doesn't match up, then you're dead and your throat will be slit. So it's like, borrowing money from a loan shark, okay? You don't want to cross them the wrong way because they do everything by the numbers. They have no soul. They have no emotion. They don't make any decisions on that. They just look at it as black and white. Do the numbers add up? Are we making a profit? Are the queens happy? If they're not, you're dead. They knew at this point, after all the confusion that took place and all the reprogramming, Enlil was a loose cannon. Okay? He was not to be trusted. So they go reporting back to the queens saying, hey, look, you put us here to make things better. And just like any scenario, where a master computer like Skynet and Terminator takes over, it evaluates the human race and sees the human race as germ warfare that needs to be eliminated, okay? Same thing that happened here. The Greys calculated that Enlil was the problem and needed to be eliminated from the equation, okay? Well, they found the perfect candidate, and they got the blessing from the reptilian queens, because the queens, once again, they don't care who's running the operation. What they care about is, where's the paycheck? Keep it coming, all right? So they'll put anybody in charge. The point is this. The Greys plotted against Enlil, okay? And being the Schutzstaffel that they were, they found the perfect candidate to overpower him. Because remember, he's the master of the sky. He's got the sky armada. They had to contend with that. they found somebody by the name of, believe it or not, Marduk. Okay, it's in the name, god of war, warrior god, Marduk. All right. Now Marduk, he was not the sharpest tool in the shed, but he had an ego the size of the Texas Panhandle that was easy to manipulate. And the reason Marduk made such a good candidate was because Marduk was he was Prince Ea's son. Okay. So they went to Marduk and said, look what your uncle did to your father. Look at the way your uncle stabbed your father in the back and chased him out of this solar system, out of this kingdom altogether, banned him, relabeled him, called him the devil. And so they got Marduk. Now, mind you, not only are they plotting against Enlil, who's the uncle, okay, they said they're also plotting against Marduk, who's the dumb one. So they used Marduk's ego to go up against Enlil. Marduk led a campaign, destroyed Enlil, chased him out, got rid of him, killed off all of his contemporaries who sympathized with him and took over, and then sat on the throne and became once again God. Well, at that point, Marduk did not have the brains to hold on to it the right way, and the Greys already had the idea in place to throw him out. So they went after him. Now that he's all by himself, he's got no one to help him out against the Greys. They take him over, throw him out, and the Greys take over the whole operation of the solar system. They place a quarantine on this solar system and lock it down. And that is the end of that. They put everything back through reprogramming again, and they make everyone understand them as the Almighty God. Now at that point they knew that reprogramming was only going to go so far. The term God was already associated with Enlil. So at that point in time, they sabotage a different type of term. There is the Egyptian term, Aman, the secretive ones, the special ones, okay? Part of Egyptian history there. What they do is they create a variation of that, the Amun-Ra. Ra being the god of the sun, they figured what a perfect way to reprogram the slave, okay? Because where it does, the throne of power is Earth, commanding the entire real estate, which is the solar system, the entire kingdom. But what powers the throne of power is the sun. You associate with yourself with the sun, you become the new all-powerful God. And so they invent the term Amun-Ra, which is a term that was never supposed to exist. And to this day, we still worship the Greys. We still worship the Amun-Ra. Think of that term, Amen-Ra, A-M-E-N. You see it at the end of every Christian and Jewish prayer that is ever uttered in temple or church. Our Father, the Hail Mary, what do you say at the end? Amen. Every time you say Amen, you are worshiping the Greys. And therefore you are worshiping your own second-class citizenship and your own slavery. Once again, that's why you got to get rid of your dim-witted religious beliefs. No room for it in the 21st century. Now, being that they invent that term, this is how they start going after another movement that was created to save the human race. With the quarantine that locked down the planet, guess who's still waiting in the wings, no pun intended? The Ankhels, the ones who eventually become mispronounced as the angels, the ones who had the relationship, the ones who gave us the gene for passion, okay? They were actually watching this whole scenario go on. Nobody knew about them. They remained very quiet, a third silent partner, watching both sides get played against the middle. They realized something had to be done. They weren't about to let the gene for passion go to waste. They needed it reawakened. So what do? Okay, this is what begins the revolution. And as I mentioned before, this is when the gene for passion funnels through the Temple of Solomon, aka the Moorish legacy, and becomes known as the Passion of the Christ. Okay, Now, in terms of the word Christ, some linguistics again that need to be clarified, all right? We are not talking about Christianity. That term is an abomination to begin with and never should have existed. It has nothing to do with the one who is misrepresented as the so-called Jesus Christ. He himself would have been appalled seeing this kind of a thing created 300 years after the fact when he was long dead, okay? The bottom line is this. The first official Christ to hit the face of the planet was Horus, and it was spelled K-R-S-T. Vowels, as you will realize in linguistics, are a crutch and were never supposed to exist. A, E, I, O, U, and even Y. That's the mortar in between the bricks for building a house. You're not supposed to write them down, and for that matter, you're not supposed to be writing anything down. Native Americans and Egyptians will attest to that. Nothing was supposed to be written down. When these idiots who called themselves Greeks started ripping off the information and writing it down, this is when it becomes bastardized. It's supposed to be taught by word of mouth, from master to student. That's the way the Egyptian university system works, and this is how it begins. After it funnels through the Temple of Solomon and becomes the Passion of the Christ, the term Christ, K-R-S-T, refers to as the seal. Okay, that's what the word Christ means, K-R-S-T. Later on, it becomes misspelled with an I and a C-H, and then of course, oh yeah, that's his last name. No, it's nobody's last name. It's a title to a major supreme prophet, whether it be Noble Drew Ali, or Abraham, or Muhammad, or Buddha, or Jesus, the one called Jesus. His real name was Isa. Or even over here in the Americas, you know, whether it be Geronimo or Chief Joseph or those kind of people. The term Christ is reserved for the major prophets. Why? Because Christ equals seal, and each prophet that comes along is a seal of the covenant for the genetic code for passion with the Temple of Solomon, with that demographic, those people. Muhammad never would have worked with the Israelites. Jesus never would have worked with the Arabs. Okay, Buddha never would have worked with anybody else. These people were meant for their own demographic, their own people. Okay, unfortunately the Jews haven't figured that one out yet. But that's what is going on here, is that each prophet come along represents another wing being built onto the Temple of Solomon. Okay, now that was the revolution that was started there, in conjunction with the Sasquatch, in conjunction with the atom, in conjunction with guerrilla warfare and the underground. There is this gene for passion that is now evolving into the Passion of the Christ.
Right off the Barnary sub-stop, Philadelphia, PA. Shots so loud you would think it was a club spot. African Americans, although we all over the web, we the hood librarians. We ship to prisons too. We reach out and deliver to those that spitting too, but it's more than a bookstore. You wonder we got it, mixtapes, DVDs, and culture products. BlackandNobel got our hands in a lot of projects. We welcome on to come build the energy, it's positive. And remember other teams is awakened conscious. Come through and experience this place of knowledge. They say they'll put it in a book if they wanna hide it from us, but we got the book so you can buy it from us. Something to read while you on a train or riding the bus. Get your read on, food for thought, get your eat on. BlackandNobel, I'm said BlackandNobel. BlackandNobel, I'm said BlackandNobel.